going to do that before I forget. Okay, everyone, well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this event, the third and final in a series we've held this fall to help welcome students to UC Davis and introduce you to global affairs and global learning. My name is Kimberly Bellows, and I'm an Intercultural Programs Coordinator in the Global Learning Hub here at UC Davis. Today, we'll be focusing on addressing global challenges through the lens of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we'll have some welcoming remarks, a presentation from our SDG interns, and finally, a panel of students and recent alumni who will speak about their experiences engaging with the Sustainable Development Goals. We'll finish off with some resources to learn more about the SDGs and how you can get involved. Like I said, this event is being recorded for possible future use. I'm gonna go ahead and stop my screen share. So first, just quickly, some Zoom etiquette. Because we are doing a bit of like a panel thing, we recommend that for the first part of the session, if you're a guest, that you turn off your camera and select speaker view so that you can see the speakers and the panelists more easily. Once we move into the Q&A, we really welcome you to turn on your cameras, and you can feel free to use chat at any time to ask questions. I will be monitoring that. So I would now like to welcome Joanna Regulska, our Vice Provost and Dean for Global Affairs and Professor of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies, who will offer some welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for inviting me, and welcome to some of you whom I know and to others whom I don't know, but I hope I will be able to meet you and hopefully actually in a face-to-face meeting at some point. So I think it's good evening, although I don't know if somebody is good morning, good afternoon, somewhere around the part of the world. So I hope if it's good morning, I hope you had a good breakfast, it's good afternoon, I hope you had a good lunch, and if it's good evening, I hope you're gonna have a good dinner soon. But before that, I wanted to talk about global affairs, and some of you know, and some of you may not know, so I want to introduce Global Affairs at UC Davis, which is really the central global and international office on the campus. And in that capacity, we are engaging very much with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, partnering very closely with other offices on the campus, Office of Sustainability, Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, some departments, academic units, non-academic units, a variety of units to really build an agenda with the actions and practices to really advance the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, and I hope you do, and if not, I'm happy to tell you that UC Davis really have a very long-standing commitment to the environment, locally and globally. UC Davis is ranked first in the US and third in the world for campus sustainability, but we are also ranked very highly as a global university. In fact, in the QS US ranking, we are #1 in the country for diversity and internationalization. So as you can see, the sustainability, diversity, inclusion, global engagement are all built into our campus strategy. And of course, we are very much deeply committed to SDGs. This actually means also that our both students and faculty are very strongly committed to sustainability, to addressing and engaging with global challenges. So in 2019, we actually put a campus survey to determine sort of a baseline of activities. And we realized that all 17 Sustainable Development Goals are being addressed by UC Davis faculty. And interestingly, that 50%, 58% actually of those addressing the SDGs are working locally in the United States. So it just shows you and tells you how the local and global are really interconnected. And this is why I love SDGs, because they really are not applying just only to some countries somewhere, but they actually applying also to us locally in Davis, Sacramento, and other parts of the United States. What we also learned from the survey is that four goals are especially important for our faculty and our faculty engaged. So that's goal number 2, zero hunger. Goal number 3, good health and well-being. Goal number 6, clean water and sanitation. And goal 13, which is climate action. Based on all of that, we've developed a really campus strategy, and we constantly redefining that strategy. So we gather and analyze data, we raise awareness, we participate in the networks, we support research, we expand the opportunities for global learning for students, and we also continuously try to articulate and strengthen university commitment to SDGs. You will hear far more from our interns about SDG agenda, but I want to point out a couple things that happened. One of them is we received funding from the Universitas 21, which is a network of universities from all over the world, to really create a global classroom model for teaching and learning about SDGs. And we partner with Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico and Shanghai Jiao Tong University in China. Focusing right now, obviously, on the virtual way of collaboration, but down the road, we hope it's going to be hybrid and in person. And we also funding some entrepreneurial projects through Global Learning Hub, through our Blum Center grants. So we support students in partnering with communities, organizations, and other around in California and abroad. And finally, for those of you who are starting, we have a global engagement living and learning community in partnership with student housing. So actually, if you are interested in SDGs, we will be offering a course, and I'll be teaching with my colleagues for students, for the first year students. It's really a seminar, a 1-credit seminar, which will cover global topics and of course include those related to SDGs. We'll hear from interns. So you know that we have created SDG internships in Global Affairs, and I think it's a great experience from just talking to our current but also past interns. We are hosting SDGs forums with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and actually our interns participated in the previous one, and the next one will be in February. So I hope you will join us for that, and then hope you will do one more in spring. We also have a Campus Global theme, and the current theme is Food for Thought, Feeding Ourselves, Feeding the Planet. And what I like about the way we thought about this theme is that it's not only about the food and nutrition, but it's also about our mind and body and art and emotions, right? Because the food for thought, it's a very, very broad way of thinking, what is it that we need on this planet in terms of health, in terms of emotions, in terms of agriculture, engineering, and so forth. And we offer mini grants to students group also. So that's something that you might want to think about it. And finally, we are members of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which also brings us all kind of opportunities. All right, I think I'm gonna be stopping here because I could go on for quite a long time, and there's all kind of opportunity, many opportunities and many resources. I certainly would encourage you to sign up for the newsletter lists on our website, because I think you can get some more information about it. So thank you so much for coming, for being here. I really look forward to hearing our panelists sharing their experience. And of course, just to reiterate that global skills, knowledge, and networks that you are gaining and you hope you will gain at UC Davis will help you really to engage with global challenges and ultimately make the difference in this world. And the world really needs you and your expertise because you're going to be the future leaders of our world. So thank you so much again. And Kimberly, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joanna. I really appreciate it. I would now like to introduce the Global Affairs Sustainable Development Goals interns, Bella, Roshni, Alex, and Michael. They are going to provide an overview of what the UN Sustainable Development Goals are and why they're important. And we wanted to include this presentation in this event because we talk so much about the UN Sustainable Goals here at UC Davis. Joanna just named a bunch of things that we do with the goals. And so we recognize that not everyone is super familiar with them. So we wanted to give this sort of introduction to what they are. I also wanted to acknowledge that one of the supervisors for the interns are here, Tom Rosen Molina, the Global Center's analyst. So thanks for helping support this presentation. And now, really quickly, I'm going to start sharing my screen. And you guys can go ahead and take it away as soon as this is up. Present, please. There we go.
Thank you, Kimberly. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're the Fall Quarter 2020 Global Affairs SDG Interns, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the creation of the United Nations SDGs and how they're relevant to UC Davis, students, staff, and faculty, and why they're important for us to engage with in a global context. Next slide, please. So my name is Bucheli. I'm a fifth-year international relations major and triple minor in climate science and policy, human rights, and professional writing. My SDG interests include goals 7, 12, 14, and 16. Next slide, please.
Hello, my name is Michael. I'm a third-year landscape architecture major. And so my interests right now are lying in goals 8, 9, 11, 15, and they're decent work in economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, and then life on land. Next slide.
Hi, everyone. My name is Roshni Desai, and I'm a fourth-year global disease biology major. My interests for the SDGs lie in goals 3, 5, 6, and 10. Next slide.
Good evening. My name is Alexander, and I'm a second-year student pursuing biochemical engineering. My SDG interests include goals 2, 4, 13, and 17. During the internship period, collectively, we're all working on SDG goal number 2, zero hunger. Next slide.
So the framework for action involving the UN Sustainable Development Goals involves goals, targets, and indicators which are all adopted by all UN member states in 2015. These 17 goals are very broad in scope and address the root causes of many global challenges. These SDGs are universal and transformational across all disciplines and industries, as well as mobilizing concrete steps. And currently, the SDGs are now more urgent than ever as inequalities are growing during our current crisis. And as mentioned earlier, some of our intern responsibilities include gathering data on UC Davis activities that promote the SDGs, raising awareness amongst the UC Davis community about SDGs through speaking events such as this and other connections, participating in key networks that contribute to the goals, support research for policy impact related to the SDGs, as well as expanding opportunities for global learning. And lastly, to articulate university commitment to the SDG engagement by crafting our own campus voluntary review. And some of the highlights from fall quarter so far have been, as mentioned by Joanna earlier, the online SDG forum for the UC Davis community. And we will be hosting another in winter and spring quarter as well. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And we have also been working with our partners and networks around the world on goal 2 specifically, which is zero hunger. Next slide.
Thank you, Roshni. There's growing recognition in the university sector that now is the right time to jump into this agenda. But as SDGs are designed for governments working towards national targets, there isn't a clear roadmap that academic institutions should follow. Our team at Global Affairs is helping define how that approach materializes here at UC Davis. Our current goal is to align our university initiatives through mapping of SDGs, focused on lateral growth and generating new activity across our faculty, our institutes, and within the student body. So why universities? Well, UC Davis just this past year received a record $942 million in research awards, distinguished itself as a national leader in climate action, food security, sustainability, and much more. It's important that we put those resources to work in the right way. Participating in the SDGs thus represents for us a shift in our institutional mindset, one where our energies will be wholly directed towards meeting the demands and exigencies of dynamic developing communities. While this process has already begun, highlighted by the Chancellor's strategic plan for the next decade for engaging at all levels, local, state, regional, national, and globally. Along those lines, we have recently announced proud partnerships with the University Global Coalition, the SDG Academy, and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, as Joanna mentioned. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you, Alex. So the SDGs, or the global goals, were created by the UN General Assembly in 2015, and they were adopted by its member states. And these 17 goals are essential to the agenda, which define a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity to be undertaken by all countries until the year 2030. And they serve as a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. In 2017, the SDGs were made more actionable by UN resolution adopted by the General Assembly, which identifies specific targets for each goal, along with indicators that are being used to measure progress toward each goal. A key part of the agenda is that no one is left behind and that everyone gets to reap the benefits of the SDG outcomes. UC Davis is engaged in research, teaching, and service that contribute to the SDGs and is committed to increasing its contributions to SDGs over the next decade. UC Davis is also committed to creating global learning opportunities for students on campus, domestically and internationally. As part of the UC system, known for being progressive and inclusive to domestic and international students, UC Davis is well known in many crucial fields, most notably in sustainability, agriculture, and animal science. Many students are taking action to solve local, national, and international issues via clubs on campus, research, strikes, protests, petitions, grassroots mobilization, and classroom learning. Professors are already doing research and teaching courses geared towards topics that fall under the SDGs. SDG awareness and attainment in coursework by UC Davis students is necessary in order for young people to understand solutions to solve grand issues like poverty, climate change, gender equality, among others, around the world, so that they can implement them beyond the collegiate level and into their careers post-graduation. They can be the change makers that naturally champion the SDGs in their work and everyday lives. Next slide, please.
All right, thank you, Bella. And so I'm just going to end this on how, what we think of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so as you can see, there were a lot of goals and they all had very different missions, but they all represented the same values of sustainability. And in 1987, the Brundtland Commission in Germany, they stated that sustainable development means that a development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And so as Joanna stated earlier, UC Davis is the most sustainable university in our nation, and they're third among the world according to the Green Metrics ranking. And so this is important for us because we set an example for other institutions to follow. And so since we have this high reputation in sustainable values, and in order to maintain this track record, professors should be aiming to incorporate SDG material focused on sustainability into their coursework for students to engage in, and that would help us achieve the goals quicker. And when we think of sustainable development, it's usually towards the environment, but the term encompasses social, economic, and environmental aspects. So sustainability and sustainable development is much broader, and it represents so many different discourses. And if you think of it, for example, healthcare workers, they may think that the third goal, health and well-being, may be the most important aspect of sustainability, while LGBTQ advocates may think that gender equality, which is goal 5, might be the most important goal. So at UC Davis, we are using this SDG framework to bring together some of these discourse communities of practice around the value of sustainability, global engagement, equity, and inclusion, because we know they're all very interconnected. And by thinking about these values holistically, it's going to help us become more familiar with the SDGs. And that's why we want to emphasize the importance of no one left behind when talking about these values. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, all of you. That was a really interesting and informative session. I feel like I learned a little bit, and hopefully that was a good introduction if you weren't as familiar with the UN SDGs, or even if you were a little bit familiar. I feel like that gave a lot of context. So awesome. Thank you so much. We're now going to move into our panel discussion, and we'll begin by introducing our panelists. So our first panelist is Radhika Marwaha. Radhika, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Radhika Marwaha. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a 4th year global disease biology major. I have a minor in international ag development. And is there anything I'm missing out on, Kimberly?
You can just say maybe like really briefly what your work was that sort of touched on the UN SDGs. We'll go into more depth, but just a quick intro.
Right. So I think I've taken like a 2-pronged approach to the SDGs, in the last 3 years at Davis, both through student organization work and then also in, classes, academics, research. So yeah, I'll just be happy to share that today.
So that's great. Thank you so much. Our next panelist is Jonathan Ho. Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan. I'm actually a graduate. I recently graduated last year. I was a biochemistry and molecular biology major. And I'm currently working as a consultant. And I actually focus on understanding pharmaceutical, commercial, and market data through analytics. So a lot of my work at UC Davis really involved working with the community of Knights Landing, which is about 20 miles north of Davis. Over the past, I'd say 4 years, I've worked very closely with the community to provide healthcare through a student-run clinic, and also through the building of a community garden. So I'll be glad to share more of that later. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Our next panelist is Lauren Chu. Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren. I am a 5th year civil engineering major with hopefully I'll be adding a minor in global international studies in the coming weeks. A little bit about my experience is I've been involved in the student club Engineers Without Borders for the past 4 years, working on a sanitation project in a rural community in Bolivia. And then I've also completed an internship in India with an urban planning startup focusing on solid waste management.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren. And our final panelist is Crystal Juarez. Crystal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. That's me. I'm Crystal. So I am now a UC Davis alum. I graduated in June 2020. And in my time there, I was an anthropology and international relations double major with a minor in human rights. So the first time that I heard about the SDGs was actually pretty early on into my undergraduate career. I decided summer going into my 2nd year at Davis to study abroad in Switzerland. And so that's where I heard about the SDGs for the first time. And it left quite a big impact on me because not only did I decide to study abroad a second time in Argentina, I learned about them again there. And so I realized that the SDGs were coming up quite frequently, but I, at that point, had no mechanism to apply what I was learning. And it just so happened that when I came back to finish off my rest of the years as a UC Davis student, Global Affairs had just opened their SDG internship. And so I became an SDG intern as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Crystal. And thank you to all our panelists for being here today. So we're going to start with a few topics and questions for the whole panel before we move into a more open Q&A. So the first topic or question is, please talk about when you first heard about the SDGs and saw how they connected to your work. And you guys don't all go at once.
So I kind of was already mentioning it anyway. So I learned about it the first time when I decided to study abroad. And so I really propelled myself into study abroad quite early on into my undergraduate career, and it worked out wonders for me. So when I first heard about the SDGs, what I thought was really interesting is that the SDGs they are pretty much a universal language. And so even though I learned about the SDGs in Switzerland, where I happened to be in a presentation in English, it was available in Spanish too, which was my native language. And so the fact that the SDGs, that image that the SDG interns also had in their background earlier, is such a recognizable image, is so significant because it's globally recognizable, even if it's in different languages. So even if I didn't know the language, for example, if the image was in Spanish and I had no idea how to speak Spanish or read Spanish, I would still recognize it as the SDGs. And I would even be able to recognize which SDG according to color and number. So I think that was what really drew my attention to the SDGs. And at the time, I was an English major, and I was debating if I would continue to be an English major. And pretty much when I was learning about the SDGs and the international forum in Switzerland, that's when I decided to change my career into international relations. And so it was pretty much my pathway right into something new, which I really appreciated.
I first heard about the SDGs in high school, actually, when I took like a AP Human Geography class. And I'd say the goals that my work is most closely aligned with is 3, good health and well-being, 6, clean water and sanitation, and then 8, decent work and economic growth. SDG 6 is pretty clearly linked to the sanitation project I've worked on in Bolivia. We focused a lot on building latrines and then promoting good hygiene, as well as like feminine hygiene, like focused more on women. And then my work in India was focused on promoting the dignity of waste workers. And so that was kind of about, empowering them and providing them with a livable wage and safe and healthy working conditions.
So, hi everyone. So for my project, I actually first learned about the UN SDGs back in middle school in a geography textbook. And back at the time, I really loved geography. But one thing that stood out to me was the textbooks will always talk about, UN SDGs in the context of maybe more impoverished nations. So I always had that idea in my mind. But it was only when I came to, UC Davis and started working with the communities around us that I realized that actually many of these situations can apply to our local communities as well. And I think that's the first very important thing that I want to bring up, is that we should always keep in mind that there are people around us who can benefit, from some of the, the volunteering that we do, and can benefit from actually some of these SDGs as well. So the second thing I'd like to talk about is, I felt that my project really involved so many different goals. Like many of you mentioned, a lot of these goals are very interconnected. And then when I was actually carrying out some of my projects, so for context, I actually served at a student-run clinic to provide free healthcare to many of the residents in Knights Landing. But I also noticed that many of them had issues suffering from chronic disease that could not really be cured through medications. Many of them also had mental issues. Many of them were suffering from depression, and these were, issues that many of them could not speak about. So that actually led me to find new ways to try and alleviate some of these issues. And what me and some of my other colleagues decided to do was to actually build a community garden, because we wanted to provide a space for people to actually meditate, to exercise, but we also wanted to provide a space for people to grow fresh fruits and vegetables to alleviate the chronic diseases within their community. So I think that the SDGs are extremely important because they are all connected and they actually can help you formulate a great proposal to tackle some of the issues society is facing.
Okay, and then the first time I heard about the SDGs was actually as part of the MDGs, so the Millennium Development Goals, which were being revised, I think at the time when all of us were in high school, middle school, not sure. But so yeah, I think I heard it as part of like a model UN conference. I should mention that I'm an international student. I forgot to say that in my intro. And even today I'm calling in from Dubai. So it's like 6 a.m. here. But yeah, good morning from here. So I think once I heard about the MDGs, I kind of like did my research. Dubai represent, yes. And I think when I came to Davis, from my first year, I ended up joining an organization called Project Rishi, which is very significant, Jonathan, in terms of what you're talking about, the community garden work. Because in my freshman year, I was working as part of a women's health and empowerment project team. And I was able to take advantage of the Blum Center's grant, which is awarded to undergraduate students. It's called Power Alleviation Through Action Grant. And so I think that was one of the most significant experiences I had in my freshman year that really defined it reoriented me in terms of my career goals. Because before that, I remember I came in as a biomedical engineering student. And coming into Davis, I knew I wanted to change my major. So it's not that it was that one experience that made me want to change, but I was really trying to see if there were more ways for me to integrate community into science, even through my curriculum. And for this experience to come at such a significant point, I think when I came back to Davis, I really did sit down and make like an action plan for myself, on how. And I wasn't thinking about the SDGs specifically, but once you try to make those connections with the community and the things you're studying, you end up doing that in many ways. And so, yeah, I think once we came back, I really focused my energy in terms of like within Project Rishi, which is an organization that works with rural communities in India. Our focus as part of the Davis chapter is to work with HIV positive populations in a rural community in South India. And so I can drop the link to the website in the chat for those who are interested to learn more about the organization. But I focused my energy on developing a financial literacy project as well as a community development project, which after doing some feasibility studies, we went to rename into an environmental health and gardening project. So we added on that component of preventing like pollution, burning of waste materials in the rural community, which are all very common practices. So yeah, I think that was one of the most significant experiences in sort of the first half of my time at Davis, but definitely, as I said in my introduction, trying to do the same things through my research. So I work with Dr. Oskan Gulakar, who is an education researcher at our campus, along with a chemistry researcher that many students might know coming into Davis because he teaches a lot of the intro classes. And so with him, I did some research on integrating the sustainability development goals into the intro STEM classes. And that is done with sort of an aim to boost student interest and really help students shape their career aspirations to give back to their communities. Because that is a trend we're noticing in STEM, wherein students are no longer interested in those traditional sort of careers, although there's so much technological advancement happening. So we did surveys, we did that research, and you can definitely find more about it again on Davis websites and so on. But that is one growing field of interest that I feel like a lot of STEM professional students are interested in. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all. One thing that struck me from what all of you were kind of saying, and it started, I feel like, with Crystal saying, like the universal language, but there's also that intersectionality and the interconnectedness, and that has to do with like the goals themselves, but then how you can sort of marry things like, pollution prevention with, good health outcomes and stuff. So I feel like there's a lot of interconnectedness and intersectionality here. So thank you so much for sharing. Our next question is, what do you like to remind people about the SDGs and their importance?
I can go. So I think the most important part for me in terms of like the SDGs is the fact that it is so broad and global, right? And I feel like oftentimes they can be really ideal, right? And though the zero hunger is something we want to achieve, but it is so important for us to sit down in our communities and try to build this bottom-up approach for change, because without noticing those intersectionalities and really contextualizing it within the communities, what is the culture that is going to surround implementation of a particular goal? What are some local challenges that are really going to hinder us from achieving these goals? I think until we do not map those out, it can be really difficult to achieve them within our local context. One example I would like to share is, I think last year with the mini grant program that Joanna talked about earlier, we did an event through this student-run clinic that I'm part of. It's called the Bhagat Singh Health Initiative, or BIPSI for short, and we serve the Punjabi immigrant population in the greater Sacramento area. But one event we put together was surrounding the fact that disability and ability justice does not really tie in very well often in urban community planning, which people end up forgetting about these communities. And so we talked about a couple of social movements, especially in Southeast Asia and Latin America, that were helping to bring attention to these topics and really make your sustainable city design accessible for everyone and anyone. And so, as I said, really making sure that in every possible way, when we are trying to achieve a particular sustainable development goal, no one gets left out, as the interns mentioned earlier. So yeah, I think that is one thing I would like to tell people to remember.
For me, something that I think is really important to remember is to try and picture yourself in the SDG agenda. Sometimes when we're looking at the image, we see the title of the UN and we immediately wonder what it would be like to be sitting in a UN conference or assembly room trying to picture up this image and conjure up how to make this happen. But really, if you try by looking at it as an agenda in which people sat down, yes, probably in that room, but to figure out how it could be applied with individuals and communities in mind, that's when you can start and picture yourself a little bit more in there. I noticed that the interns had originally said what their SDG interests are. And so I think that's a really good place to start, is by looking at the agenda and identifying what you're really interested in. For example, mine, I believe, were 4 and 5, which is like quality education and gender equality. And so trying to start and picture yourself in the agenda, I did it by looking at my family history and figuring out like what really means a lot to me. And so I think that that's really a great way to get started, because I for sure know that it could be very overwhelming to see so many goals and look at them and think like, what am I going to do with this? And so that's, I think, a tangible first step, is to look at it and say, like, where do I see myself here and what can I do with that? And so I think that's really important to start considering, is what your interests are and where you fit in that agenda. And the significance of that is also that the agenda is so important because it's malleable. And so it should be applied at the local level, kind of as you were mentioning earlier. And you should think about how you could do it within your local communities, and how you can approach that situation would be also to look at your interests. Even if you tackle one goal or 2 goals, because that's what you're really interested in, you're already doing a lot of work towards the SDG. So it's really significant to look at the whole picture and see like how much work people are trying to put into making a better world. and facing these global challenges, but really you can start with any one goal and you're already contributing so much to the agenda. So potentially don't let the title of the UN or like the whole 17 goals overwhelm you too much, because really any work that you do is work towards the SDG agenda, and that's why it's so important.
I want to add to what has been already said about how all these goals are kind of interconnected. Because I come from like a very, engineering heavy technical kind of background, and like it's very easy for us to think that we like only have one specialty and that's like, our field, we stay in our lane. But with the SDG goals, it's kind of cool how they are all very interconnected. And so with this latrine project, yes, it's like part of Engineers Without Borders. It's about like designing something that was engineered into a community, but there was so much room and so much opportunity to incorporate other goals. And I think that is what was honestly the most important about that project, was not just building, but also employing the locals in the entire supply chain, and properly training them on the construction and the maintenance and things of that sort, so that it'll continue on past our involvement, as well as, hygiene, education, and gender equality. So making sure that women were included every step along the way, that we were designing them, not just for the average person, which is usually, the male is the average person, but including women in that, because of course, they're half the population as well. So I think that's what I would remind people of, is just, even if, a project is on paper is designed to fulfill one goal, there's always ways to incorporate the others, and it's important that you do incorporate the others.
Yeah, I fully agree with everyone's points as well. I think everyone, had great explanations. Personally, for me, one thing I'd like to add is how I think about the UN SDGs. Personally, I like to think of them very broadly. And one thing that stood out to me is that they don't focus on just one area, like the economics or culture, but many of their goals tackle these many different areas that many countries are, trying to improve upon. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind, in that whenever we, just like what Lauren said, whenever we tackle some of these problems, we try to incorporate many of these other areas as well. And to think about solutions that do not only tackle things from maybe an engineering perspective or an economic perspective, but also understand how it can impact the culture, the communication between people, as well as the communities. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to add.
When Jonathan was speaking, it also reminded me of like the way to kind of approach these things from different points of view is to have different people involved that have different like disciplines and different backgrounds. And I think like building a team that is really interdisciplinary, is the way to accomplish that.
Yeah, and I just quickly want to jump in and say I agree with you, Lauren, because I'm part of DLab, which is part of this larger program in international energy technologies. But basically what we do is we offer courses to both undergrad and graduate students. So we put people up in teams of 3 to 4, and it's totally interdisciplinary. Everyone's coming in from different majors, different fields of study, and they work on a specific project. So I think when I took the class, my project was to convert a vintage tractor into an electric tractor for the student farm. And then at the same time, we were looking at health concerns with that, in terms of vibration and the spine. And then we were looking at how much like it would cost to convert the engine, how efficient the engine would be. So really looking at it from different, very different angles. There are more community-centered projects. We do projects in West Africa. We do projects in local underserved communities within sort of California and even beyond. I will mention that we are teaching this course both in winter and spring. So if anyone's interested in signing up, you can send me an email. I'll even drop in the link to the website here so you can sign up for the course. But basically the course for this year is going to be centered around resiliency and resiliency in design to adverse events such as both the pandemic and also wildfires and building food security, etc. And talking a lot about social movements as well. You know, we're trying to build a coalition of Black farmers across the state and do a lot of those community-centric things. So yeah, I just wanted to drop that opportunity.
Yeah, and I love that, you know, you guys talked about the interdisciplinary and needing different perspectives. And I think it goes even beyond majors to like different backgrounds, right? Different walks of life, different, you know, countries of origin. Like that's so much of what we do at Global Affairs is think about, like, if we're going to tackle global challenges, we need to have diverse perspectives in the room. You can't tackle these problems, which are global, without having those varied perspectives. So I'm so glad that you guys brought that up. Thank you. And our final question is, what advice or encouragement do you have for students interested in getting involved with the SDGs in their communities or via their education? I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, some different opportunities, but I'd love to get more perspectives.
So for me, how I really got involved in my project was basically really thinking about what I was very interested in and just pursuing it. You know, I think we should just take the initiative to look for opportunities that are out there, and there are many opportunities out there, and go for it. You know, reach out to people who have more knowledge, reach out to people who are involved in these other opportunities. And there are many resources that UC Davis actually has. I have been very fortunate to be able to work with Global Affairs, Global Learning Affairs on several occasions. And I see Lily over there. She has been amazing. And I've worked together with her on, you know, the Knights Landing Community Garden project on several occasions. And I'd say that there are many resources out there and people who can actually help you. So that is my advice.
I feel like I have so much advice in this specific question, so just bear with me a little bit. So as a former SDG intern, first and foremost, if you're a UC Davis student who are interested in interning, it's a really cool internship to consider, because as we've discussed, there's the goals already have 17 different areas that are interdisciplinary. And so it really does go beyond major. I know Roshni mentioned that she was global disease biology. And I think I believe it was Alex who said some type of engineering. And so as you can tell alone, like on that internship alone, there's already different majors and collaborations that's going on there. And so that internship is a great opportunity if you don't have the time to intern or cannot intern at the moment. SDG events, they just keep popping up through Global Affairs. And so it seems like it's going to be on a rolling basis. So even if you could just attend like this event, just continue to attend, you're already learning so much. And you're doing your part in terms of getting to know what the SDGs are about. So those are two to start off. Another thing that I want to mention is that when I was an SDG intern, I did a little bit of research to see what cities were doing in terms of applying the SDG agenda. And so I looked at Los Angeles, which is my hometown, and I looked at New York. And so New York City and LA both utilize the collaboration of university students to figure out how to apply the agenda locally in their city. And so as university students, that just kind of opened my mind as to what importance we have in our communities. And LA and New York were really relying on their university students to develop a language that was better applicable for their city. And so what that means is that even though the SDG agenda already has a universal language, these cities wanted to tweak it a little bit so that it made more sense for what the city's main priorities were and what goals they wanted to tackle first. And so what the university students did is that they helped with research, they did studies to figure out what to prioritize. And so if your city hasn't come out with a universal periodic review, and that's something that you're interested in, you could always even reach out to your local governments and see what they're doing and how you can take part in that. So I think that would be like a really impactful way to get involved with the SDGs. Some other way is that nonprofits are also really interested in doing SDG work. So once I stopped as an SDG intern and as a UC Davis student, I joined the it's called Alquimia Global. And so it's a nonprofit. And I worked with them for a little bit because they were really interested in the crisis at the border and being able to give resources to the people there. And just getting involved in that because of my familiarity with SDGs made like many more opportunities open. And that's how I learned about the other Universal Periodic Review. Sorry, to clarify, Universal Periodic Review is countrywide, and what I meant to say earlier was the Voluntary Local Review, which was the city review. And so I've been working on both of those, so that's where I got the language mixed up. But all of those reviews take teams and teams of people. And so if you want to know where you can get started, you can just even look up those reviews and see what it's about. And those reviews often also say what work has already been done. And so if you see an organization and you're like, wow, that's pretty interesting, at least now you have the information of an organization to reach out to and see what other SDG work you can take part in. So I think there's a lot of avenues that you could take, but UC Davis is obviously a great way to get started and to look at those resources.
Quite a few things come to mind for me. As Regulska had said earlier, I actually took 2 of the D-Lab classes, and that was a really great way to get to know other students who were kind of like-minded in global thinking and also from different majors. And so I got to learn a lot in cool ways from that. So if you can make room in your schedule, those are really great classes. I'm also pursuing the Global International Studies minor, which is my study abroad program counted for a good amount of those units, but then I took 3 other classes that fulfilled my general education requirements, but they're just more focused in a global, area. And so that was a really great way for me to fit that into my schedule. I'd also really recommend the study abroad internships if, once COVID dies down and things open up again. But that was a really great way for me to intern at a nonprofit because a lot of nonprofits don't pay interns. And so financially that would be pretty difficult, but with a study abroad internship, you can qualify for a lot of scholarships, especially in India, because it's not as popular for study abroad. A lot of the students were able to receive sizable scholarships to fund that opportunity. And so that was a really good experience. And then for the past 4 years, I've been involved in Engineers Without Borders, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, we are open to all majors. We encourage non-engineering majors to apply because they, of course, have so much to offer and different insights. So please feel free and welcome if you're non-engineering. But we have 3 different projects focusing on water and sanitation primarily, but of course there's education components, there's women empowerment components, and I'm sure others that you guys could suggest, and we can incorporate those into our projects. So I can drop some information into the chat about that, but that's a great way to stay involved throughout the year, as well as long-term. We have a 5-year commitment with communities, minimum commitment. And so it's a really great way to get to know a community and work with them every step of the way for a project. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think same for me. A lot of opportunities come to mind. Davis is great in that sense. And also, hi, Lily. I didn't see you there earlier. Yeah, I just want to say once more, the Blum Center's grant opportunity is something that is, I think, one of the most, I think one of the best opportunities that I was able to take advantage of, especially because with a lot of the scholarships and grants and anything that you can apply for, there's always something that does not allow international students to take advantage of those opportunities. But this was one that was open to everyone. And I think it's quite encouraging, for students who are trying to maybe come back to their communities or go elsewhere and take, the UC Davis SDG training with them. And apart from that, I already talked about the DLab courses. I also want to say that look within your majors. Maybe you can take some classes that allow you to do like a project. I know in sort of the public health sector, I took a class in Springwater. It was called International Health, and it was a class that was open to both grads and undergrads. And we worked to study an intersectionality of like COVID-19 and communities. So I think our paper was based on liver dysfunction in African-American communities. So yeah, look within your major. There's also a lot of majors that have practicum opportunities. Roshni can speak to this as well, but our global disease biology major has that opportunity. And through that, what I did was my practicum was centered around Arab and Afghan refugees and trying to develop a tool for victims of domestic violence, specifically for this cultural context, because we know that for refugees, especially from this part of the world, there are a very unique set of challenges that impact their acculturation processes and so on inside the United States. And so studying that was something that really aligned with my personal interest in the SDGs. Other things you can do, I would say, are really explore the student organizations. I talked a little bit earlier about Project Rishi, but another thing I did in my second year was a few of us students, we got together and we started a journalism platform called Other Collective. And again, I can drop the link in the chat for that. But basically what we do is we have this decolonial perspective on media, and we try to highlight narratives from Middle East, North Africa, South Asia. So these are our primary, areas of focus, but then also we do that solidarity work with communities outside of these broad geographical regions. And especially for me, trying to tie in journalism and that human rights perspective with a lot of the other interests that I had, like health and quality education was important. I will say that just this past weekend, something that we were doing was submitting a public comment for the California Department of Education, because one thing that ended up happening was over the past week, they removed a couple modules on Pacific Islander studies and Arab American studies, which were put into the appendix, and tying into quality education for our communities. That was something we could speak about within the local context. So there's a lot of action items that you can do. And I think, as Crystal mentioned earlier, start by mapping out what is something you personally are interested in and just take it from there.
Real quick, because you mentioned organizations, Radhika, and I remembered another point that I wanted to say. I think as UC Davis students or any university student who is encouraged to be a part of organizations, we have a very unique opportunity to bring up the SDGs, because as students, we're oftentimes club presidents, secretaries in any of the executive board. And so I noticed in some of my organizations as I was nearing graduation that it was hard to connect like the senior class students and like the incoming club members. And so I think a great way that I started to realize to get people involved and to have every member of your organization express like what their interests are and what they really care about is to bring up the SDGs. And you can bring it up as a president, you can bring it up as just a club member and say like, this is what is important to me. Like as a club, let's all figure out what's important to us and work from there. And I think that's a really cool way to get the SDG agenda in your club and also to get everybody participating. So I just remembered that.
Awesome. Well, I have some things to share later on, but I feel like your guys' ideas are all so amazing. And I think it does go back to, like Crystal said, like, what are your interests? And then like branching out from there. And as you can see from all of these amazing panelists, the sky is the limit. There's so much out there. So thank you to all of our panelists for such an engaging discussion. We now want to open it up for questions from attendees. So please feel free to turn on your cameras if you'd like, unmute yourself, or post the questions in the chat and I can read them out loud. We'll take a few minutes to do this. So any questions from any of the participants?
Well, I have a question. So how many of you are gonna run for political office? Come on, come on, come on, come on. How many of you are gonna run for political office?
There's a possibility.
You have to make your dreams reality, and we need, as I put in the chat, we need leaders. You see what is happening. We need leaders. We truly need leaders, and we need great diversity of the leaders. And you really truly represent this. You have to. You just have to. You know, one of our graduates from UC Davis just got elected to the assembly. He's 25, okay? So what's wrong with my question? You have to. You just have to.
And there's a lot of resources out there, you know, there are a lot of resources to help people run for office. So
I'm gonna come and run your campaign if you decide. You know, I've done a lot of women's political participation, so here you go, your chance.
Well, and I feel like it starts small too. You know, I worked for a county supervisor when I was at UC Davis, a longtime county supervisor, and she started by running for her local school board. And then she ended up being a state senator, state assemblywoman, I think, and then county board of supervisors. And that local government is often where a lot of this stuff happens, you know, a lot of this work happens, like so many of you talked about that local.
And you know, any of you can stand in the UN and speak from that platform about the importance of SDGs globally and locally. I mean, it was fabulous just to listen to you. It's like, it makes my day. It makes me feel more optimistic that like you guys gonna run the good world. I mean, it's really, really, I mean, your work is phenomenal. Radhika, thank you so much for mentioning intersectionality, because so often it's getting forgotten. So thank you, thank you. It's really, it's so impressive and so inspiring.
Definitely. Other questions from anybody?
Don't be shy. Can be.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to mention that I'm putting the Global Affairs SDG page on there, just because that's probably, we talked about how to get started, and that's probably a really great way to start. And so I just wanted to put that out there in case anybody needed it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to thank you guys for this presentation. I didn't know anything about the global affairs or anything at UC Davis. Is my first quarter here. So learning about this was really helpful to align what I want to do at this school. So thank you. I appreciated this event.
So I hope, Anna, we're going to see you soon. We're going to see your name.
Yes.
There's a lot of ways to get involved.
Connect with Tom. Tom will tell you what's happening.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Of course, anytime. We are available. For sure.
Okay. So before we finish this event, I do have some resources that I want to share. So, and feel free to continue putting things in chat. We'll have a couple minutes at the end, but I just want to share some resources. I cannot get this thing to present. Here we go. Okay. So I'll post, thankfully, Crystal has already put the first one in chat for us, so I won't have to do that one. I will put links in chat in just a minute for these as well. So first, like Crystal said, we have a Global Affairs webpage dedicated to SDGs. So here you'll find, it's a great place to start. Like she said, here you'll find a wealth of information, everything from how the SDGs are relevant to California, to ways to engage with them on campus, to information on UC Davis, experts working on SDGs, like Joanna mentioned earlier. Next, we have an article actually written by Crystal about 5 ways to engage with global challenges at UC Davis. So there's specific suggestions on how to engage with the SDGs while you're at Davis, which I really enjoyed that article. You also might want to check out the SDGs in Action, which is an app where you can learn more about the 17 SDGs, get news on your favorite goals, find out what you can do to achieve them, create your own events, and invite others to join you in sustainable actions and events. Another opportunity that I wanted to highlight specifically, because it's such a good opportunity, is the UN Millennial Fellowship. Here's a little bit more information about it, which is a semester-long leadership development program for undergraduate students to improve partnership building and community impact skills. It's a really awesome movement of social impact student leaders committed to making the SDGs reality by 2030. So fellows are provided with training and recognition for implementing their project on campus over the course of August to December 2021, as well as connections with student leaders around the world. The priority deadline is January 31st, but the program is competitive and early applications are encouraged. You can check out the link for more information or contact Lily Larson, who's here, with the UC Davis Blum Center for more information. And I'll put links on all of this in chat. And then I need to go back. First year students, also like Joanna mentioned, there's going to be a 1-credit seminar related to the Global Engagement Opportunity LLC, but open to others, which will go into global learning and the SDGs that will be offered next winter. Joanna, is there anything else you want to share about the seminar?
Okay, I unmuted myself. So the idea of the seminar is really to introduce UC Davis to you as a global university, to talk about different centers and institutes, to talk also how the engagement with SDGs might help you to think about your own professional development and career. And this usually it's a small group, but it's a great conversation. It's a 1-credit course. We have done, several of us done it in the last year we did it every quarter we did. This year we're gonna do, because this year it's kind of a little bit crazy. So this year we're gonna do in the winter quarter, a great way to connect with other students. And some of those students actually who took our class now are part of the Global Ambassadors in Global Affairs, and they're doing work and we're working with them together. If you watch the welcome video done by the students, actually some of them are from our GO LLC. So great way to connect in a smaller group, but in a group.
Awesome. Great, thanks, Joanna. And then finally, we shared a link about for other ways to connect with Global Affairs newsletters and such earlier, but I wanted to highlight these two. I just popped everything into chat as well. So we have the Global Affairs monthly events announcement email list and the Global Learning Hub newsletter, which are both great resources for finding out more about what's going on, what opportunities are out there. They're both monthly, and so there's not flooding your inbox. And as a Global Affairs staff member, even I find them super interesting and useful. Not even, they are interesting and useful. So those are great. Those are great resources. So that concludes our the resources. Does anyone have any final comments or questions or anything that they want to share? I'm going to go ahead and stop share now.
I will just emphasize once more really quickly here. Thank you, Radhika. Thank you, Jonathan. previous Blum Fellows. We are really, really proud of you, as Joanna said and Kimberly said. You guys are the future leaders, and all of you that I didn't know, either Crystal and Michael and so forth. Thank you very much. You guys are doing an amazing job, and you represent really well our university. We are really proud of you, and we would highly encourage all of you to consider becoming now United Nations fellows, because what we are doing is really to provide our UC Davis students with the opportunity of hands-on with the training. It's a semester longer that they're going to provide. The UN is going to be providing this leadership training, and we will also facilitate some of this training, and you'll receive a certificate, and we'll be able to implement a project on campus related to the SDGs. So we highly encourage you to consider that as well. Mainly you that somehow are already connected with the SDGs. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other final questions, comments, anything anybody wants to share? I feel like our chat is really rich. Go ahead, Radhika.
Yeah, I quickly just put in, I think it's a flyer on this event that's happening, connecting public health and human rights, and a lot of interesting conversations on things we can actually do in our careers. So I think it's really related to the last portion of our discussion. And it's based on public health in Palestine. So if anyone's interested, please do check that out.
Thank you.
And then real quick, I'm just gonna drop my email in the chat. Anybody didn't want to ask anything right now, but is interested in talking about it later, you can feel free to email me. I really don't mind. I'm a first generation college student / graduate, so I really want to help other people out to do this whole university thing. So anything you have, just let me know.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Even I'm going to drop my information.
Awesome. And if you have follow-up questions about the presentation in general or anything, I'll put my email in there as well. We are recording this, so I'm not quite sure where this is going to be, but we are recording it. So I'll follow up with all of you, but I'll put my email in there in just a sec as well. Okay. Well, on behalf of Global Affairs, thank you so much, everyone, for participating in this event, panelists, interns, speakers, participants. I also want to acknowledge that this is the start of International Education Week. So thank you for joining us as we all engage in international education. I'm actually going to place here in the chat a link that is our campus's International Education Week page. We have a couple other events happening this week, so please check it out. And yeah, thank you again so much for attending, and have a great rest of your week. And here's my email address as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. You were great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.